I hope you can hear me. Would you please type plus if you can hear me well, if everything is okay and we can start? I see people joining. Let me check maybe by typing if you can hear me. And again, unfortunately, the chat does not work the way I want it to, so I think we will skip it. So I see that you can hear me. This is really nice. It's good news. It means that we can start. And today, ladies and gentlemen, we have the last but one streaming. Next Wednesday is going to be our last streaming. And then I will tell you the way we're going to have our final check on the material learned and on the translations made. So let's begin. And today it's going to be quite a longish translation. Streaming, broadcasting, because the topic is pretty bulky, I would say. Yeah. So we're going to talk about non-finite forms of the verb, and we are going to deal with. We are going to deal with. Yes. What happened? Why I cannot continue? Oh yes. We are going to discuss three non-finite forms. These are participle, these are gerund, and infinitive. So, my keyboard probably does not work well. I need to please turn on. Maybe just a second, ladies and gentlemen. Cannot get it moving. Maybe I can somehow arrange it so that I can why it doesn't work, I don't understand. For some reason I cannot move the slides. Probably I will have to then manipulate it some other way. Yes, I will have to manipulate it this way then. So as you can see, we have a translation challenge, and no. Fortunately, this does not work the way I want it. I need slide number 2. Oh my God. One moment, ladies and gentlemen. I will try to arrange it another way. Maybe it will work this way. So probably we will start with this slide, but it's not the right order. But anyway, we have to start with something while I'm trying to fix my running of the presentation, which I cannot run, unfortunately. So, ladies and gentlemen, would you please look at this example and see the... This is already the answer. No, it doesn't work. Oh my God, what happened? No. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's have just 5-minute break, okay? I will try to fix it, and I would ask you just to take some tea and come back in 5 minutes, and we will start it anew. Unfortunately, I cannot get it working. Maybe now I will. Just a second, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so I think it should work now. At least my keyboard is on, and I hope I can make it. So, yes. Finally it works, and now I have to go back to the beginning of the presentation, and I hope, ladies and gentlemen, you did not get too bored, and we can start. So when we talk about non-finite forms of the verb, these are infinitive, participle, and gerund. We can face with two types of sentences. When there is no subject, if you look at this slide, you will see it. Making the experiment, we follow their procedure. So in this case, we have the participle first, participial construction, making the experiment, which, as you can see, is translated by a clause. Когда мы проводили этот эксперимент, мы использовали их метод. Or the second participle, for example, used properly, the instrument gives reliable information. Если этот прибор использовать правильно, он даст надежную информацию. So, as you see, we have to differentiate between the participles and non-finite forms of the verb, and we need to understand the message to translate properly. And normally, these forms of the verb should be translated by clauses. Если, пока, когда, and so on and so forth. So, this you need to remember. If there is no subject, please translate the sentences as subordinate clauses. If we have a subject, if you look at these sentences, you will see the way we have to work with such translation challenges. The circumstances being favorable, we completed the work on time. So we have the subject, the circumstances, and again we translate these notions, these ideas by way of a clause. Так как условия были благоприятными, мы закончили работу в назначенный срок. We know the pressure to decrease as altitude increases. Мы знаем, что давление уменьшается по мере того, как высота подъема увеличивается. So, from this block of information, we can make a conclusion that translation should be made by way of making up clauses in Russian. Okay? In technical language, this is important because clauses, they give exact information, and misinterpretation would be out of the question. If we look at the non-finite forms of the verb in the indefinite tense, for example, whether permitting or the considerations being incompatible, present indefinite or past indefinite, here usually we mean when we have the present indefinite, we usually mean future or present, and you have to be careful with that. You need to look at the second block of the sentence to understand what the author means, future or present. For example, weather permitting, the expedition will start in the morning. Will start helps us to understand that here we deal with the future. Если погода позволит, экспедиция отправится утром. And again, if we have the indefinite form, we need to look at the main clause to understand which aspect is meant, past, future, or present. The considerations being incompatible with our decision, we had to postpone the decision. So had gives us the idea that it should be translated in the past. Мы вынуждены были отложить обсуждение, и соображения были несовместимыми с нашим решением. If we have perfect non-finite forms of the verb, we should always translate it in the past and sometimes add the particle уже. The model having been tested, we could recommend it for mass production. После того, как модель была испытана или уже была испытана, мы смогли рекомендовать ее к массовому производству. Measuring having been carried out, we shall use the results in our work, even if we shall use, yeah? We have to deal with the past translation of the first element. После того, как измерения уже будут проведены. Yes, so we have the result and we need to translate it by way of result. Let's talk about participle in more detail. Participle first can function as an attribute. For example, we have two sentences that we need to translate with the help of participle one. And I'm inviting you to translate in our chat these two sentences into English. Yeah? The only condition is that you need to use the first participle as an attribute, okay? Please translate your vision of these two sentences in English. Были опубликованы противоречащие друг другу сообщения. Целый ряд животных, живущих в земле, питаются растениями. Let's wait for the first three messages to see the way you see the vision, these two sentences in English, and then well, anybody, any first translators? You can translate for the first sentence first and then provide the second translation in the second message. I see the message from Adele. Conflicting messages have been published. Good idea, yes, great. There were published two reports contradicting each other. Yes, also good idea, good translation to that, right, Dmitry? Messages contradicting one another were published, and a number of animals inhabiting the earth are before, right? They were published contradicting announcements. Right, so I see that you can figure out the participle and use it properly in the translation. Yeah, if you look at contradicting reports, the reports contradicting a number of animals living in the ground devour plants, yes, or feed on plants like I have. And if you look at my translation, you will see conflicting reports like conflicting messages, yes, and a number of animals living in their soil feed on plants. Yeah? So participle first does not usually present much of a difficulty unless it occurs in participial construction. So, participial construction or the first participle as an adverbial modifier can provoke some problems in translation. For example, reading books and make notes. The universal motto was adopted, being more economical. Yeah, underground. Yeah, why not? So, you see that we can have a preposition before a participle or have no preposition before the participle. If we have preposition, then the message is more exact, and the translator does not usually have any problems dealing with the translation. But if there is no conjunction, then there may be certain issues. So, когда я читаю книги, я обычно делаю пометки. Универсальный двигатель был принят так как он был более экономичным. So, then if there are no conjunctions, then you have to differentiate the exact message of the clause on your own and to be really exact in it. Yeah. When we have the first participle as an adverbial modifier, we should also pay attention to the punctuation, to the commas. For example, water having weight and occupying space is a form of matter. We have used the simpler method, eliminating questioning. So the punctuation, the commas, they allow us to see that we have extra information, like the clause which does not relate to the final word but to the whole message. Yeah. So sorry, these two sentences can be translated as вода, обладая весом и занимая определенное пространство, является некой формой материи, вещества. Or мы использовали более простой метод, что позволило нам устранить вопросы. If we deal with the second participle, usually it does not provoke any problems as well. For example, the experiment made in our laboratory was a failure. Эксперимент, проведенный в нашей лаборатории. I believe you know that the second participle is the one rendering the passive meaning, right? The passive message. The idea, as stated by the scientist, эта идея, эта мысль в том виде, как она была изложена ученым, не представляет никакого интереса. Sometimes there may be issues when we have the second participle used with prepositions. And there may be two prepositions used in a row. For example, some theoretical considerations only touched upon the last chapter. Or the lecture followed by a film was very interesting. So in this case, when we have a preposition, we usually start translating with the preposition. Right? Touched upon, о которых вскользь упоминалось, followed by the film, за который последовал фильм. But again, I believe it's not a big deal, it's not a big issue, but for those who may have some hesitations about this problem, you can look at this slide and remind yourself of that. So, let's translate this sentence. We have the second participle, and in my opinion, the sentence is a little bit tricky. So again, I'm waiting for the first 5 messages with the translation of this sentence into Russian. And I'm not going to read the sentence because pausation may help you to understand the trap, okay? So please, your visions of this sentence in English. So first 5 translations. Yes, I see. Лео, использованный метод содействовал процедуре. Использование данного метода облегчило процесс. Использование метод поспособствовал этому процессу. Использованный метод облегчает протекание процесса. Использованный метод облегчил процедуру. Every single one of these translations, they rendered absolutely correctly the meaning, and some of them actually agreed with mine. Использованный метод упростил всю процедуру. I just need to draw your attention to the articles again. Yes, Jane, you took it from the tip of... please remember that sometimes, and in most cases, articles are translated. We've talked about that, right? Использованный метод упростил данную процедуру, эту процедуру, всю процедуру, and so on. So, and we had the slide before when there was a failure in the beginning of my presentation. There is a tendency for the method to be used. Yes, Anton, Zarema, Shade, and Jane. Yes, I see your translations. They are just right. Существует тенденция к тому, чтобы использовать этот метод во всех экспериментах. Right? For the method to be used. So here we have the infinitive coming on the table, right? Now we're going to talk a bit about the infinitive. And this is an infinitive structure, and I believe you've had enough observation of this statement, which just opens... What happened? I'm sorry. There's some mix-up of the slides. Yes, sorry. The slides got messed up, but it's okay, we will ignore it. Either way, we will never continue if I start fixing it. So, coming back to the second participle. Again, we may have some trouble when we translate something, when we deal with the clauses preceded, or rather with the clauses not preceded by any conjunctions, right? So, for example, written in pencil, the article was difficult to read. So maybe at first glance it is easy, but when you start thinking about the translation, it may be a bit provocative. Here we have to identify the message of the clause, and this is the reason. Так как статья была написана карандашом, ее было трудно читать. Once said, a word cannot be unsaid. Раз уж сказал слово, его нельзя взять назад. Unless otherwise stated, the value will be considered constant. Если не будет оговорено особо, если не будет сказано по-другому, yeah, we have word for word, то данная величина будет считаться постоянной. So, here, when we have the conjunctions like once or unless, this is quite okay. But when we have none of them, the same situation as with the first participle, we have to think and be quite sure what about the message of the clause, about the meaning of the clause, if it's a reason or time or manner or whatsoever. When we talk about absolute participial construction, we also can face some troubles depending on where we find it, in preposition or postposition. For example, the choice having been made, all the other alternatives have been rejected. So, if we have preposition to the main clause, then again we start figuring out the idea of the clause. So, here, this is the time. После того, как выбор был сделан, от других вариантов отказались. The other conditions being equal, при прочих равных условиях. But this is a cliche. All the equipment removed, the explorer stopped working. После того или когда все оборудование было убрано. So far you have one big idea to remember. Identify the meaning of the clause before you start translating this, and then find the appropriate conjunctions in Russian. When we have absolute participial construction in the postposition to the main clause, usually it deals with the message of the reason or effect. if you look at the first one, only the first choice was hard to make. The rest of the choices causing no trouble. So this is the contrast, yeah? А остальные уже не вызывали затруднений. We carried out a series of reactions, the raw materials brought from their laboratory. Причем исходные материалы были взяты из их лабораторий. Or, this data must be taken into account, the effect of interconnections being by no means negligible. Так как эффектом взаимосвязи ни в коем случае нельзя пренебрегать. So, depending on where the absolute participial construction is located in the complex sentence, you can find out the message of the clause. And just to crown it all, with the participle, you see, in my opinion, the most typical sentences prone to be mistaken at, right? With water being cooled, the rate of the reaction was low. So, I hope you got it right that we have here the time. Когда вода остывала, скорость реакции была низка. With the model reconstructed, we may start a rethinking of the whole process. Так как модель была перестроена, или после того, как модель была перестроена, мы можем пересмотреть весь процесс. So, of course, here we need the context, right? But usually this is the reason or the effect. Let's translate the sentence here. Try to be the first one. Those who are normally not so active, try to beat up and break into the leaders list, okay? To be the first one to type your translations in our chat. Because if I see a translation, I can comment on it and you can get the feedback whether you're doing the right way or not doing the right way. And it will be easier for you in terms of your homework and final translation, the exam translation. The optimal method was noticeably superior to the others, with the former beating the latter on both tests. So in my opinion, this is kind of shrewd sentence and not an easy one to crack. And it's a good chance for you to see the meaning and to translate it and to type your Russian variant right now for me to see and give you the feedback. Please, I'm waiting again for the first 5 translations. So that I can give you the feedback. Great, we have first one. Оптимальный метод был заметно лучше по сравнению с другими, так как использование ранее метод обогнал другой в обоих тестах. Yeah, I think you got the idea, but the translation is a little bit confusing. If you try to brush it up a bit, maybe restructure a little or use a synonym to использованные ранее. Okay, let's wait for more translations coming. So guys, don't be shy. Some other ideas? Somebody else can check, test herself or himself. No? Does it mean that you didn't understand? Okay. Yes, Дмитрий. Оптимальный метод заметно превосходил другие, так как изначальный метод обошел последующие в обоих тестах. Самый оптимальный метод заметно превосходил другие, так как его составляющая превысила показатели по обоим тестам. No, Adele, sorry, this is not the idea in here. Сырият. Оптимальный метод был заметно лучше остальных, причем он превосходил их в обеих проверках. I think so far Siriyat is the closest to the perfect translation. I really like your interpretation. Would anybody else like to try? Okay, so then let's look at my way. Well, first, I need to draw your attention that only Leo used the inverted commas around the word оптимальный, but it should be retained for sure. This is like the accuracy of translation. Оптимальный метод был заметно лучше всех остальных, причем он превосходил их в случае обеих проверок. So we have former stands for the third, and latter stands for the others, right? When we have complex object, talking about object plus participle, because you know that complex object may be object plus infinitive, object plus gerund, and so on. Here we have object plus participle. Usually it does not sorry, I got another translation. Этот оптимальный метод был заметно преимущественный по отношению к остальным, предпочтительнее probably mean, поскольку этот недавний метод не проиграл, наоборот, обошел предшествующий при проведении обоих тестов. So, speaking about complex object, we dislike the problem being treated. Here we see the translation. Нам не нравится, что проблему трактовали или проблема трактовалась таким образом. We know the problem having been solved long ago. Мы знаем, что проблему уже давно решили. Yeah? We consider the parameters as utilized. Мы считаем, что этот параметр используется, and so on and so forth. So you see that normally complex object is translated by impersonal structures. Трактовались, решили, используется when we do not indicate the doer of the action. For example, we have tested the device. We have the device tested. Here we have just one little difference. And those who know the difference, would you type plus? And who doesn't know the difference, doesn't feel the difference, would you type minus? So that I can see who is awake and check whether you can feel these finer points. Would you type plus if you know the difference and if you can translate these two sentences? And minus if you don't really show a difference between these two sentences. I'm more interested in minuses actually. That's why if you're not sure, don't be shy. Type minus because this is a sign for me that I need to talk about this in a more detail. Okay, I'm very happy to see the pluses. Yeah, in technical language, this kind of difference is really important. То есть мы протестировали данное устройство, и нам протестировали данное устройство. Right? Или мы заказали испытание данного устройства. As for complex subject, again, you see that we have a complex subject translated the way like we translated complex object by impersonal structures. Видели как? Постулируется что? Можно считать что? I believe it's not a big problem. You can return to this slide if you need and brush up some information. And we are moving to gerund. So, Gerund, as you can see at this example, can be represented by active and passive forms. Реакцию завершили нагреванием, heating, смеси в течение часа на водяной бане. Каждый образец испытывается, is tested, после погружения, after being lowered, passive gerund, right? Gerund can be translated both by nouns and verbs. So, let's translate this sentence. His having made this experiment is a known fact. It may sound a bit clumsy for you, but you can face these sentences now and then. Well, please, your interpretations of this sentence. His having made this experiment is a known fact. Please, your versions. То, что он провел данный эксперимент, известный факт. Его проделанный эксперимент является известным. Известный факт. Известно, что именно он провел этот эксперимент. То, что он провел этот эксперимент, является известным фактом. Всем известно, что он провел этот эксперимент. То, что именно он поставил данный эксперимент, является общеизвестным фактом. Well, I'm not sure that we're stressing the word his here. So we don't need the word именно. То, что он провел этот эксперимент, известный факт. Probably the focus is even on the verb. Yeah? То, что он уже провел этот эксперимент, является неоспоримым фактом. Ребят, смотрите, фокус здесь не на слове his, а на слове having made. То, что он уже провел данный эксперимент, да? Является известным фактом, неоспоримым фактом. So, please remember this kind of statement and the way we translated this. Yeah? And we are turning to the infinitive. Hip hip hooray, this is our third non-finite form of the verb. And infinitive, as you know, can function as the subject or some other type of parts of the sentence. And infinitive can be translated by verb or a noun, right? To account for these variations is in principle straightforward. Объяснение этих изменений в принципе является простым. Condensation proceeded as usual to give corresponding compounds. Конденсация протекала обычным путем, давая соответствующие соединения. So, I want to draw attention to the second sentence, because normally we are used to translating infinitive by nouns or verbs, but here you see that we have a participle in Russian, right? Давая, active participle. So, in my opinion, in technical language, all non-finite forms of the verb can be a little bit interchangeable. So it's like you can translate one with another. So, when do we have issues when we translate infinitive? Well, first we need to remember about the message of the infinitive of the future bound action. The curves to be presented. Кривые, которые будут представлены. Yeah? So, to be presented with infinitive can function as the future obligation, right? Or, such information is unlikely to have been available from the user. Маловероятно, что данная информация была получена от пользователя. Here, in some past action in the past, then the infinitive should be perfect. To have been available. Then it will mean the past. Only in this case. In all other cases, it can never denote anything in the past. For example, the books published, публикуемые книги. The books being published, книги, которые сейчас печатаются, публикуются. The books to be published, книги, которые должны быть опубликованы или будут опубликованы. And we have another translation challenge. Please, those who haven't expressed themselves, would you please kindly type your translation of this sentence? To have been chosen to play a part in this experiment prompts in me an inordinate pride. So, it may be challenging in terms of message identification, but I'm sure you will be able to translate. Okay? Please, your view on the translation of this sentence. Is there anybody to see the meaning in this statement and is trying to render it into Russian? To have been chosen to play a part in this experiment prompts in me an inordinate pride. Я безмерно горжусь тем, что меня выбрали для участия в этом эксперименте. Yes, Lera. Beautiful translation. Really nice. Yes. This is the meaning. Yeah. I will be keeping an eye on our chat and looking at some other translations, but look at the idea. То, что мне предложили принять участие в этом эксперименте, вызывает во мне необычное чувство гордости. Yes. So basically the idea was rendered by Lera. Maybe it was not so detailedly exact as in my interpretation, but anyway, the message is clear. То, что меня выбрали для участия в этом эксперименте, пробуждает во мне непомерное чувство гордости. Yes, Таня, well done. Ольга, то, что меня выбрали для участия в этом эксперименте, внушает мне необычайную гордость. Внушает гордость, it's not the right cliche, вызывает во мне. Then я безмерно горжусь тем, что меня выбрали для участия в этом эксперименте. Yes. Я горд, что меня выбрали для участия в этом эксперименте. Very nice. Быть отобранным для участия в этом эксперименте пробуждает во мне непомерную гордость. Yes. Я ужасно горжусь тем, что меня выбрали для участия в этом эксперименте. Yeah, but just mine stylistically some words are too casually colored. Like я ужасно горжусь, непомерная гордость. Think about the connotation of the words, right? Избрание меня для принятия участия в этом эксперименте вызывает во мне сильнейшее чувство гордости. Yes, why not? Yeah, why not? Another challenge would be translation backward. And could you please, could you please translate the statement to, well, maybe it's not fair because I have already shown you the interpretation. Look, at the first glance, you may fail to see the infinitive used here, but in such translations, when you translate from Russian into English, sometimes translators fail to use infinitive, but the infinitive sounds really natural in this case. So, the author claimed to have obtained pure products. After certain verbs, the infinitive looks very, very natural, and of course you need to know these verbs. Мы проведем этот эксперимент, причем исходные материалы будут взяты из другой лаборатории. Due to some mix-up in the slides, it's not the infinitive which is used, yes? but the maybe infinitive, as you can see, we shall make the experiment with the raw materials to be taken from another laboratory. Будут взяты, as if you remember, the infinitive expressing the message of future obligation. With the raw materials to be taken from another laboratory. When we come to complex object again, but now object with infinitive, again, we need to understand the message of the clause and translate it appropriately. We proceeded calculation, taking the value to be valid. Here we have both the participle and the infinitive in one context. Принимая во внимание или считая величину верной. Yeah? This allows fine technological operations to be automated. Это позволяет автоматизировать тонкие технологические операции. Again, in my opinion, complex object as well as complex subject does not present much of a difficulty. Yeah? For example, Fishburne is reported to have reviewed 24 methods for estimating the parameters. Известно, что Фишборн сделал обзор 24 методов оценки этих параметров. Yeah? To have reviewed – сделал. These rocks were not reported to exist elsewhere. Не сообщалось, что эти горные породы существуют где-то еще. Well, and luckily for us, I have run out of my slides, but probably you remember that we had 2 slides before dealing with the sentences for translation. I will send them in WhatsApp as well for you to have enough convenience for translating of the sentences. There will be more sentences and the text. And the deadline, as usual, is Sunday. Next Wednesday, we are going to have our last streaming. Yes, these are the home assignments. So you will get part of the sentences for translation and a short text. Again, I encourage the method of translation challenge. Try translating the sentences or the text on your own according to the time limitation and with maximum 3 peeps into the dictionary or online dictionary translator, and then try translating or editing rather than translating the sentences you worked with without any time limitation, but with the purpose of quality following. Okay, so this is going to be it. Sorry for the delay in the beginning. I hope this presentation was not much of a mess. Sorry about that. And I'm looking forward to your translations on Sunday and to our final streaming on Wednesday next week. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for being with me today. And